Where will the Vikings likely fall in the 2021 draft? Vikings need a new quarterback. We've seen it. Kirk Cousins is not reliable. Kirk Cousins cannot. Okay, well, yes, he can win big time games. I'll say right now, Kirk Cousins can obviously win big time games, but he's not a player you can rely on to win you 16 games a season. He's not a player you can rely on to even give you that one seed in the NFC, especially when you're going against some of these defenses. Now, I know it's not all Kirk Cousins' fault. I know a lot of it is the offensive line, and a lot of it is that Kirk Cousins does not move around enough that he should. Kirk Cousins needs to move around more, but a lot of it is the offensive line, of course, and then a lot of it is that we're paying this player enough to where we can't even keep other players. So Vikings will likely be needing a quarterback in the next year's draft. What we've seen from the last 5 drafts, you need to get a quarterback in those top 10. You need to get a quarterback in the top 10. If you don't take a quarterback in the top 10, you're going to end up with a quarterback like Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins was taken 15th overall and has not worked in the NFL so far. I had a whole episode or whole segment of an episode talking about this. Dwayne Haskins has not worked so far, but still, he's only started 10 games in the NFL, so you have to see how he goes forward. But you can't take a quarterback unless if you're in the top 10. I just don't want to see it happen. I don't think this next year's quarterback draft is going to be that great. Although Vikings, of course, there is Trevor Lawrence out there. People are saying tank for Trevor Lawrence. This is not going to be the case because there is a lot of teams worse in the NFL than the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings, of course, are in a good position to get an offensive lineman, though. You don't take guards often in the first round. You don't often take guards in the first round, but you can definitely get an offensive tackle worth where the Vikings are at. Vikings are a middle of the pack team. Vikings are not bad enough. The Vikings are not good enough to compete, but they're not bad enough to tank. They're not bad enough to where they can get Trevor Lawrence. People say tank for Trevor Lawrence. That's not the case. Given we don't know who's going to be the first overall pick in next year's draft, possibly Trevor Lawrence, if he looks anything like he did in Clemson last year, Trevor Lawrence will be the first overall pick. But of course, we don't know how he's going to look. Trevor Lawrence might have an awful season. We saw what happened with Tua. He was the 5th overall pick, not even the first, after everyone was saying tank for Tua. We don't know how this year is going to look, but still, tanking is a lot of the times a good thing to do. I'm more on the side of try. Like, you want to try, but you don't want to keep so many players to where you're a mediocre team. I say a lot that mediocre is the worst team. 8-8 is the disgustingest thing you can be in the NFL. It's so bad. When the Vikings were 8-8, or were they 8-8 and 9-7 or something 2 years ago, Vikings were I think they were 8-8. Yeah. It's the worst position you can be in the NFL. The worst position in the draft, because you obviously don't make the playoffs. You can't compete for a Super Bowl. You can't even compete in your division. You don't even win your division if you're 8-8, and you miss the playoffs. And now you're stuck at what, the 20th pick? What is the 20th pick going to give you? Or no, not 20th. You would probably be like 18th. Okay, 18th, 15th, somewhere around there. 17th. We don't want the Vikings to be there. We do not want the Vikings to be 17th and 18th if we're trying to get an offensive tackle in next year's draft. It's very important that the Vikings get an offensive tackle or a quarterback in next year's draft. Now, I do think Kirk Cousins will be the quarterback for at least one more year for the Vikings. They might draft a quarterback to sit behind him and maybe develop into the starting role eventually, but I don't think that they'll be able to get one first round. I don't think they're going to be able to trade up with some of these teams. We have to see how the Vikings can do. Vikings at best right now are a 10-win team. I know it's a bit of a reach. Vikings have to still win 9 games going forward and only lose 3 more. That would be a 10-6. Probably not good enough to win the division because we are in a division with the Green Bay Packers, but definitely good enough to make a playoff. That's fine. If the Vikings can go to the playoffs, I know they'll probably be one and done. I don't see Kirk Cousins being able to go against Russell Wilson or Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs and being able to come out. But if the Vikings make the playoffs, that's okay. If the Vikings are a 10-win team, they make the playoffs, that's okay. We don't want the Vikings to be 8-8. We do not want the Vikings to be 8-8. That is the worst case scenario for this Vikings team going forward, for this rebuild mode that the Vikings are really in right now. Of course, Vikings don't have a good enough defense and need to go kind of rebuild. I do think they'll probably get a head coach if they miss the playoffs. Definitely going to get a head coach if they miss the playoffs. I'd be surprised if they don't. But anyways, they can't compete in the NFC. Now, of course, there is 7 teams that are going to be going to the playoffs in the NFC this year. Vikings could be one of them. Maybe even with 9 wins. Maybe even with 9 wins, Vikings could make the playoffs. Still, 8 wins is the worst case scenario for the Minnesota Vikings because it's going to put us in a terrible spot. And I don't think they're going to be able to trade up to get any good picks. So we still play a lot of bad teams. We play the Jaguars, we play the Panthers, and the Lions twice. Jaguars, Panthers, Lions twice. That's 4 wins right there. That's already 5 wins for the Minnesota Vikings. We have to give it that the Vikings are probably going to win those games and maybe 2 more. 7-9. Of course, the Vikings have to be in the middle of the pack team right now because now they're going to get a terrible playoff spot. Of course, That's everything Minnesota sports. Anyways, this will probably end up with the Vikings 7 and 9 about that spot, which is the worst spot we can see. Where can the Vikings get with this? Well, we have to look at the draft. So the draft is designed to give the worst teams the better picks and the better teams the worst picks. That's how the draft is designed. Now, I know a lot of the times there is some movements because of strength of schedule. Broncos have a very tough schedule, even though they're not a bottom team in the NFL. Certain teams have a lot harder schedules because of the divisions that they're in and the divisions that they're playing. So we have to look at how the draft is going. We'll just go with how the draft is designed. We know the bottom 3 teams in the NFL. There's the bottomest tier, and then there's the trash tier, but not the worst. And then there's the mid tier. This is where the Vikings are. The Vikings sit at the mid tier. Let's look at the bottom tier. This is the Jets, the Giants, and the Jaguars. These are the bottom 3 teams. We have to know that these 3 teams are probably going to get the 1, 2, 3 picks in the draft. You look at these teams right now. Jets and Giants might go forward with their quarterbacks. Jets have Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold has not had a chance in the NFL. He's not even getting the blame for how bad the Jets are right now. Sam Darnold is not getting the blame for how bad the Jets are. It's their coach, Adam Gase, is getting the blame. Giants, again, Daniel Jones is in no place to succeed right now. He is in no place to succeed. So both those teams, both New York teams, are probably going to be 1-2 pick and might not even grab Trevor Lawrence. In fact, they might trade down. I don't think they're going to trade all the way down to where the Vikings are, but they might trade down a little bit. Outside of that, there is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, of course, are going to take a quarterback. If they continue to be how bad they are and a bottom 3 team in next year's draft, they are going to take a quarterback. They will probably trade up for the first overall pick, and one of these teams will trade down 2 spots so that the Jaguars can get a quarterback. Probably Trevor Lawrence. We don't know who it's going to be, but they are definitely going to be looking for a quarterback if Gardner Minshew cannot give them enough wins to where they probably can't be in the competition to get Trevor Lawrence. So, and then we look at this bad team, this bad tier. This is not the tier the Vikings are on. They're, of course, in the mid tier. This is the bad tier. These are the Houston Texans, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Denver Broncos, the Dolphins, and the Lions. 5 teams right here who all might not even go for a quarterback. Vikings still have a shot at getting a quarterback. All these teams might stick with their guys. Now, Houston Texans, of course, have Deshaun Watson. They are not taking a quarterback. There is no way the Houston Texans are taking a quarterback. Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow. They're not taking a quarterback either. Those are 2 of the teams that are probably going to be picking before the Vikings, who are not going to be looking for a quarterback. Denver Broncos, they have Drew Lock. Drew Lock has showed a lot of promise. They might be going forward with Drew Lock. He's looked great in the NFL so far, and I think that they will go forward with Drew Lock. He really understands the playbook right now, and I don't think getting a new quarterback would be a very smart decision for the Denver Broncos. I think beefing up that offensive line is probably the best decision for them. And then the Miami Dolphins, they're not looking for a quarterback either. They took Tua Tagovailoa in last year's 5th overall in the draft. And then, of course, the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions have Matthew Stafford, and they've been sticking with Matthew Stafford for a long time. They might be looking for a quarterback later, but probably not first round. So those are 8 teams right there. 8 teams who are only one of them I can see looking for a quarterback in next year's draft. Lions, maybe. Denver Broncos, maybe. Giants and Jets, I don't see it happening right now. I don't see any of those teams grabbing a quarterback besides Jaguars, maybe Broncos, maybe Lions. So where does this put the Vikings if we're looking for a quarterback? We can't get the best quarterback in next year's draft. I don't know who's going to be the second best. I'll say right now, maybe Justin Fields. There's some other guy probably in Cincinnati. I don't know. There's other quarterbacks out there. Can the Vikings trade up and get one of these quarterbacks? Or should we just sit where we are comfortably and grab an offensive tackle? Or trade up and get an offensive tackle? I don't know how the next year's going to look because we don't know how this college football season is going to look. But the Vikings are not sitting in a good spot right here. The Vikings are not sitting in a good spot right here. Of course, there's 2 teams above them that could be taking quarterbacks, Jaguars and maybe Denver Broncos. We'll see if they would stick with Drew Lock. We'll see how he does the rest of the season. Of course, he's injured right now, but we will see how he looks other than that. So, and then you have the Vikings. The Vikings sit mid-tier with about 8 other teams. There's a lot of teams that are mid-tier. The entire NFC East is there. There's a lot of teams that are mid-tier where the Vikings will be picking. I'm saying it right now, Vikings are a mid-tier team. At the beginning of the season, I did not think so. I thought Vikings were going to take this division. Now we see how this defense is looking. We see how our Vikings offensive line is looking, and we see how our quarterback is looking. Vikings are a mid-team right now, and that is the worst thing in the NFL, the worst possible position for the Vikings to be, sitting right at mid-tier. Where can the Vikings get a player at mid-tier? We need an offensive lineman. We need a quarterback. How can the Vikings get one there? Now, we'll look to see what offensive linemen do fall. Grabbing offensive linemen in the middle of the pack of next year's draft is probably not a good decision. You don't often see players, offensive linemen, that you can take in the middle of the draft. Usually it's wide receivers, possibly some edge rushers, those kind of players you usually see in the middle part of the draft. You have to trade up to get those top tier corners. Vikings always draft corners. I don't think that they're going to be taking one next year. You can get those top tier corners, those offensive linemen, those quarterbacks. That's what goes top 10. Vikings need to pick top 10. So the best decision would be for the Vikings to tank right now. That's not going to be the case. Vikings are too good of a team to tank. They're not going to be above any of these teams. I don't think so. These are all the teams I just named. Texans, Bengals. Yeah. All the teams I named are worse than the Vikings. We can all agree those teams are worse than the Vikings, and the NFL draft is built to give the worst teams the better picks. So we're going to assume that all those teams are picking before us. Vikings can trade up to get a quarterback. It's looking very unlikely we can get the first pick in the quarterback, though. We can get the first quarterback off the board. It's not looking likely at all for the Vikings. I do think they will be in seek for a quarterback. First round, Vikings are sitting at a terrible position to get that quarterback. They're going to have to trade up if they want to get a good quarterback. And what are they going to have to give up? Their first overall pick, or their first round pick, of course. And then they're going to have to give other pieces, and it's just not going to be good enough for the Vikings to trade up. Of course, Vikings do have a lot of draft capital, but we need to invest those draft picks that we have in our offensive guards and in our defensive tackles. We can get good offensive guards and defensive tackles, second, third, fourth round. We can get those pieces later on in the draft. First round, we need that offensive tackle. Did I say offensive tackle? I meant offensive guard. We need that offensive tackle in the first round, and we need that now because we need someone who can step in and get Riley Reif's job. Maybe even Brian O'Neill. Brian O'Neill's not looking great this season. Maybe use him as a guard because, of course, Brian O'Neill is built like a guard, honestly. He's not even built much like an offensive tackle. Get someone to replace Riley Reif. He has one more year on his deal. Play him out throughout his deal or cut him. I don't care. They did revamp his contract and probably should have cut him. You can get Ezra Cleveland to step in too. So Vikings need that top pick if they want to get a quarterback or one of the top offensive tackles off the board. You don't have to see very many great offensive tackles that come off of the board, and when they do, they are in the top 10. They are in the top 10. Vikings are not going to be picking top 10 in next year's draft. We know this for a fact right now. Vikings offense is looking way too good to be able to pick top 10 in next year's draft because they're not a bottom 10 in the league right now. People will disagree, but they are not a bottom 10 team in the league. They are a middle of the pack team, and this is exactly where the Vikings are sitting, and this is exactly where the Vikings are going to be having to pick, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I would say I want to be optimistic and say that the Vikings are going to only get 5 wins. I want to be optimistic. I know that's probably a bad thing to predict, but I'm going to have to go with that the Vikings are going to be an 8-8 team. Right now, they're 1-3. Not a good start to the season, of course. Right now, they're 1-3. 8-8 might even seem like a good comeback for the Vikings. Might even seem great for the Vikings. That's not great for the Vikings. That is the worst case scenario for the Vikings. And I have to just put my predictions on that the worst case scenario is going to happen for the Vikings because this is usually what we see with the Minnesota Vikings, that they're going to be picking middle of next year's draft. Kirk Cousins is going to continue to be our quarterback. Vikings will have to trade up if they want to get one of those top 10 quarterbacks. You have to trade up into the top 10 if they want to, and the Vikings are going to have to give up a lot to do that. And honestly, right now, I can't see Rick Spielman doing that. I just don't see Rick Spielman trading up and getting a quarterback. I don't think he's going to trade up at all in the first round. Maybe a little bit and get an offensive tackle. I don't see it happening. Kirk Cousins is Rick Spielman's guy, and I want the Vikings to get a new quarterback. I don't think Rick Spielman is on the same page. I don't think at all. Vikings are probably going to be picking about 15th, right in the middle. No, 16th would be right in the middle. Vikings are going to be picking 16th in next year's draft. Not sitting very comfortably. Not sitting very comfortably at all. We need an offensive tackle. We need a quarterback. Those go in the top 10. Those don't fall to 16 very often. And when they do, that's because they're not good. That's when you just draft them because of their position. Dwayne Haskins was drafted in the first round because he was a quarterback, not because he was talented. Because he was a quarterback that they just needed. They needed to draft a quarterback, so they took him 15th overall in the middle of the draft. He went 15th overall because he was a quarterback. He fell to 15th overall because he was not a top-tier quarterback. And that's where the Vikings are sitting. And that's exactly where we don't want to sit. Let me know what y'all think. Do you think the Vikings are going to be picking 10th overall in next year's draft? You can comment on this episode if you're listening to, or if you're watching this on YouTube or the podcast. You can come to my Instagram. Let me know what you think is going to happen. But I think Vikings are sitting right in the middle, 8-8, probably picking 16th, 17th, somewhere around there. No team's going to trade down that much. I don't see the Jets or anyone trading down that much with the Minnesota Vikings, because you look at all the pieces the Jets need. They need a star. The Jets need a star on offense or defense. They need someone that's a huge playmaker. They're not going to be able to get that where the Vikings are sitting. They're not trading down that far. They might trade down, but probably not even trade out of the top 10. I don't see Jets, Giants, Jaguars, Broncos, anybody trading. Or Broncos I could see. I don't see any of these guys trading down that far, though. Because all these teams that are worse than the Vikings need those picks, and I don't see them trading down this far. And I don't see Rick Spielman giving up that much draft capital to get a good quarterback, a good offensive tackle in next year's draft. We're not sitting comfortably where we're at right now. Vikings are not sitting comfortably where we are at right now. I'm not going to say to cheer for the Vikings to lose. If you're watching this, you're most likely a Vikings fan, and I'm not saying to cheer for the Vikings to lose, but every time they lose, keep it in the back of your mind. This is going to help us in the future. Let me know what y'all think.